Hello, everyone, and welcome to my presentation. Today, I will be answering the question, can the hero's journey and astrology help us heal? And what I'll be going over is practical daily uses for myth and astrology as it relates to our personal well-being. But before we begin, I want you to pull up your natal chart, either on your phone or on your laptop. Maybe you already have it printed out in front of you. That's just fine. But pull it out because we're going to take a look at it later on in this presentation. First, I want to go over basic foundations. I know that many of you who are watching this video already know about the hero's journey and you're already well versed in mythology and perhaps even Joseph Campbell's work. So I'll go over briefly what the hero's journey is and what myth is. Hero's journey is a transformational journey through space-time that informs the hero or heroes of their purpose. As you can see here in this illustration, this hero at the top starts in the ordinary realm or the normal world, where everything's fine, everything's seemingly fine and dandy. And then they get called into an adventure where they go through a number of events, obstacles, challenges, trials, and failures perhaps. They learn new skills, acquire new strengths, recognize some weaknesses, and they come full circle back around. So we'll get back to why this is extremely important, but I want you to take a look at this. And myth is a traditional story, especially one concerning the early history of people or explaining some natural or social phenomenon, and typically involving supernatural beings or events. And Joseph Campbell says in The Power of Myth that myths are stories about the wisdoms of life. And I'll explain and illustrate why that may be so. So why does this matter? Why does this hero's journey and myth matter? Well, the hero's journey is pervasive in all myths. So if we're looking at myth, we're going to see this cycle that I just showed you in the last illustration. We're going to be seeing this cycle play out in books, movies, TV shows, and that's because this particular journey is the language of the journey of the soul. The soul has to journey through this particular cycle in order for it to expand and grow. Even in Hollywood today, there are specific requirements if you want your movie to be accepted for funding, if you want your movie to be popular. Now, to illustrate this notion, Hollywood has very specific guidelines that you must follow in your screenplay, and that is this. It has 3 acts. You must have 3 acts. The screenplay must not be longer than 120 pages. The first 30 pages is the first act, where the hero is in the normal realm and gets called into the extraordinary realm or the unknown. The second act happens within this next 60 pages, and that's when the hero is going through trials and tribulations and ends up in the abyss or the very bottom dark pit where they have a death and a rebirth. And then the last 30 pages are when the hero has that revelation, comes out and goes back and comes full circle back into the normal realm. If somebody in Hollywood is looking at your screenplay and you don't have these very specific requirements in your screenplay, and the hero isn't going through this journey that you can see here, then it will not likely be funded. There is a program. One is called Enigma, and there's another program. I can't remember the name of it right now. But these programs are computer algorithms that take a screenplay, that take a movie, and it can project within hundreds of thousands of dollars to accuracy the amount of money a particular movie will make. In other words, it looks through each movie and screenplay and looks for these markers that have been put in here based off of this hero's journey formula, based off of mythology. And if it doesn't have that, it's not going to be popular and it's not going to make a lot of money. So this is very important to Hollywood producers. And if you notice that the most popular books / movies now out there are Harry Potter, books like Harry Potter, books like Hunger Games, and books like The Lord of the Rings, where you have a hero, and that hero is going through this very specified hero's journey. Okay, the obstacles might not all look the same, the death and rebirth might not look the same, but it has these very basic components in it, and these are the most popular. Now, if it doesn't have it in it, we subconsciously, as the audience, recognize that it doesn't have these components in it, and we might wonder why we didn't like that movie. Oh, I didn't like the movie because the ending was terrible. And it's because it's not following this script that's not only deeply necessary in Hollywood, but it's deeply embedded within us. It's deeply embedded within the mythologies. So how does this information help us heal? Joseph Campbell says that if you realize what the real problem is, losing yourself, giving yourself to some higher end or another, you realize that this itself is the ultimate trial. When we quit thinking primarily about ourselves and our own self-preservation, we undergo a truly heroic transformation of consciousness. And what all myths have to deal with is transformations of consciousness of one kind or another. We can use this wheel to help us identify what we've gone through in the past. You might automatically think of some trial or some failure that you had undergone in the past. Maybe it was in childhood. Maybe it was a traumatic experience that you've experienced. And I do think that if you use this, and if you see that you are the hero in your own journey, that you will start to ask yourself how these challenges are shaping you and what lesson you had to learn. And by doing this, this is sufficient enough to start the process of introspection for transformation. The Bhagavad Gita says that on this path, on this path, effort never goes to waste, and there is no failure. Even a little effort towards spiritual awareness will protect you from the greatest fear. I like this quote because in today's culture, we often live by this idiom, go big or go home, which kind of leads to a cultural mindset of like, if you don't give it your all, then you're not doing enough. And this just isn't true if we accept this verse from the Bhagavad Gita, which is saying that even just a little bit of effort is going to protect you. It's going to help you. And indeed, if you look at this and you start to ask yourself these critical questions, what lesson was I supposed to learn from this? What hero am I supposed to become? And how am I to help community and society based off of my experiences? Then we can help ourselves overcome whatever our greatest fear is. We can start that process at least. The Upanishads has this amazing lesson about self, and this is found in the Brihadaranyaka. I hope that I'm saying that right. And it says that everything is loved not for its own sake, but because the self lives in it. This self has to be realized, and this is Yajnavalkya telling his wife that the meaning of life can be found in learning about the self. He says that when we meditate upon self, we realize the self and we come to understand everything in life. And so going back to the hero's myth and the hero's journey, I believe that this illustration can be used as a tool to help meditate on the self and to help us realize the self and to help us understand everything that happens or happened in our life. So what does it mean to realize the self? And I think this is going to be different for each of you in the way that you'll answer it. But I think the gist of it is that when you realize the self, you begin to understand the meaning behind who you are and what your purpose here is. I invite you to finish the sentence for me. It's also found in the Brihadaranyaka. Separateness arises from identifying the self with the. Now, if you've read the Upanishads, maybe you know that the answer is the body. That separateness arises from identifying with the self with our body. Who I am is not this body. It's something much deeper and much less tangible. And the same goes for each of you watching this. I hope that you understand. I hope that you see that as well, is that your body is not who you actually are. It's something much deeper and something more soulful than your body. When we identify with the body, we start to kind of lose who the self truly is. So when we're relating to the hero is every man. So the hero is an often somewhat of a two-dimensional character as compared to the other characters in the books or in the movies. And that's because this character is made so basic that anybody can kind of relate to this character. And relating to the hero as self, if you're relating to that character that you're watching in the movie, or you're looking at the hero's journey and you're seeing that hero as you, as self, and you know that you're going to go through this cycle, then it kind of places you within a larger story of, one, your family history. So you're seeing that, oh, the reason why I went through all this is because the life that my mom lived and the life that her mom lived, and all of these generational things that were passed down over time. It also places you in a story within community. So you kind of see, like, you have a job here, you have a purpose, you have something that you have to do here and share with the community and within the greater story of the cosmos. Because essentially this journey that the hero goes through is a journey of the cosmos. And I'll get to that in just a second when we talk about astrology. But when we understand who we are in the larger story, we can begin the process of self-actualizing. And on this slide here, I have the First Nations hierarchy of needs. It's informed by the Blackfoot Nation Alta. Self-actualization is about understanding who you are as a spirit having a human experience, who you are within your family, who you intend to become, and where you are in the story of the cosmos. When you're able to self-actualize and know who you truly are, then you can move up in the level and to the level of community actualization. And that's where you help your community. You utilize the tools that you've identified within yourself, your talents that you have. Based on all this experience that you've had, you recognize how you can help your community, and then you start helping the community to actualize what it is meant to be and what it's meant to look like. And then you ascend again to cultural perpetuity, which is where you can create something like a legacy, understanding that your being, who you truly are, isn't this body, it's something beyond, and your legacy can be carried beyond. So I've talked about the hero's journey, and now I'm giving you a side-by-side of the mythological journey of the hero and the astrological chart that we have here. Now, this is not my natal chart. This is a random natal chart that I pulled. But I want you to see how very similar these two look. These circles affirm a cycle that our life is mapped out on. If we look at the natal chart, what we're seeing here is a three-dimensional journey that our soul or our being is going through and on. This is a material journey. So this is a cosmic journey. It's a planetary journey in this astrological chart. Okay, so it's very grounded in a material 3D realm. And on the other side, if we're looking at the hero's journey, we're looking at a fourth dimensional journey. This is a journey that's happening within consciousness. This is a symbolic journey, and it's an archetypal journey as compared to the cosmic journey, as compared to the planetary journey. So here we have these two circles affirming our cycles of life. One is very grounded in the three-dimensional realm, and the other one is very grounded in our fourth dimensional collective consciousness. Benjamin Dykes, he's a leading astrologer and philosopher who was asked in an interview, which if you're looking at this in our class, you've seen that interview. But I thought this was great to add into this presentation because Benjamin Dykes was asked how astrology added to spirituality, to which he replied that astrology provided practical techniques and proof of how small we are compared to something greater and divine. Astrology, he states, goes beyond experimenting with the world, with worldviews and new ethics. So rather than trying on new spiritual wisdoms here and seeing if they fit us, or these ethics here and seeing if they fit us, what he's proposing is that we connect to the stars for clarity. And so my question was, why does astrology help us become more sound and healthy again? How does astrology help us heal? Astrology can be a tool for us. And as Ptolemy says, that the Egyptians combined the medical art with astrological prognostication, since their astrology pointed out to them the kind of temperament liable to be acted upon, as well as the events about to proceed from the ambient, and the peculiar influence of these events, while their medical skill made them acquainted with everything suitable or unsuitable to each of the effects to be procured. For without astronomical knowledge, medical aid would be more frequently unavailing. Pythagoras told us that thou shalt likewise know that according to law, the nature of this universe is in all things alike. You have in yourself some things similar to God. Therefore, use yourself as the temple of God, on account of that which in you resembles God. And Manilius says how the entire universe is alive in the mutual concord of its elements and is driven by the pulse of reason, since a single spirit dwells in all its parts and, speeding through all things, nourishes the world and shapes it like a living creature. Mythology comes from astronomy, astrology, cosmology. When the ancients were looking at the stars, they were creating these mythological stories to help them conceptualize what was happening beyond. And that's why mythology is so effective as a tool. Mythology comes from astrology. So astrology can likewise be used as a tool to help us understand self, just as we utilize the hero's journey to understand who we are, where we're going, why we went through these, and what it was meant to teach us, and what we're meant to teach others. Astrology can do the same thing, is to help us understand ourselves. Now, I've asked you to look up your natal chart. I want to focus on just a few of the planetary alignments within your chart. The first one is the Venus sign, and there's a reason why I chose each of these. Venus has to do with the love language, with your love language. And I think when we're talking about healing, it always comes down to the relationships that we've encountered, because those relationships are what have taught us or have harmed us or traumatized us, is the relationships that we've had with others and throughout our childhood and throughout our lives. And so when we're talking about how do we heal, we always have to look at the relationships that either harmed us or helped us. So if you look at your Venus, what is your Venus sign? That's your love language. And this is very basic. We're not getting to the deep astrology of it all. One, because I'm not an expert in astrology. I do utilize astrology to help me understand better who I am and how I operate. And it's this basic understanding that helps me. So that's where we're going to stay for at least this presentation. But if you look at your Venus, you can kind of get an idea of what your love language is. And so this might help you better understand how you can operate in some of the relationships that may have been traumatic, or even just understand why it was so traumatic for you. And likewise for your Mars sign, I've chosen your Mars to look at because your Mars is how you get what you want and how you give love. And so what is your Mars sign saying to you? How do you give love, and how do you get what you want? And that might also inform how you behave in the relationships that you've either had or have currently. Your Mercury is how you communicate. What is your Mercury sign telling you about how you communicate? My Mercury is in Sagittarius, and I have a tendency to stick my foot in my mouth. So knowing this, I can kind of work around myself. I can understand self a little bit better and say, okay, this is how I communicate. And I'm going to show up this way. It might not sit well with some people, and that's okay. No more trauma has to come from this, because now I understand better how I want to be loved, how I give love, how I get what I want, how I communicate. And then also your sun sign is kind of like how you mainly, your main attributes. Of course, many of you probably already know your sun sign. But this is, again, just basic understanding of how you're going to interact in relationships. And I think if we know these very basic signs, we can better understand. We're making that very small baby step to understanding self and how we operate and how we prefer to operate with others. Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Again, I'm quoting it, and it says that all this is full, all that is full from fullness. Fullness comes. When fullness is taken from fullness, fullness still remains. When we're using myth and astrology to decipher meaning in our experiences, we're looking at the full picture, the fullness from which we came. We're looking at the full picture of this hero's journey. And you're going to go through many of those journeys. There's a large one that you're going through for the entirety of your life, and there's small ones that you go through with every relationship and with every new experience, with every change that you have. You're going through this cycle. Dr. Mario Martinez wrote an amazing book called The Mind-Body Code. And what he argues is that the mind has the ability to heal the body and vice versa. He brings up many studies, and in one study, he talks about Dr. George F. Solomon, who found that thoughts and emotions can influence the immune system. And in this study, the more assertive or able to set reasonable emotional limits patients had, higher levels of T cells in their blood. In other words, the more the patient was able to mitigate emotional distress and limit how much emotional distress they allowed themselves to have for any particular interaction, they are said to have higher T cells in their blood. Now, he also argues that it has to do with identifying archetypal wounds, that in order for you to be able to regulate these emotions, you have to be able to identify archetypal wounds within your body. And he says there are 4 archetypal wounds, and that's shame, betrayal, abandonment, and unworthiness. And he says that for every experience that you've had in your life that caused you trauma or distress, or a wound, essentially, you can categorize it as being one of these 4 archetypal wounds. So I'm gonna guide you through a little bit of a experience here, and I want you to just think of a time when maybe you felt, just pick one, because we don't want to go too deep into the trauma just yet, especially for this presentation. You can do it again, you do it again and again and again, but picking just one memory that you have that perhaps related to shame, maybe it's betrayal, maybe you felt abandonment, or maybe it was unworthiness. And what is the story around that experience? What happened that made you feel unworthy, or maybe abandoned, betrayed, or shameful? Now you're identifying, you're taking a step to identify what that archetypal wound is that maybe is still within you. And he says, yes, this is what's necessary. Just like when we use the hero's journey, we're identifying these archetypal wounds, because again, the hero's journey is a journey within consciousness. It's a 4-dimensional journey. It's a symbolic archetypal journey. So when we're using the hero's journey map, we're identifying some of the stuff, some of these archetypal wounds. Now, once you've identified what archetypal wound you might have still within you, you're going to feel some emotions. Maybe your body will feel some type of way, viscerally, and that's okay. I'm going to work through that. There are 4 healing fields. Dr. Mario Martinez argues that once you've tapped into the archetypal wounds, you're going to now shift over to the healing fields. And those healing fields are honor, which combats the shame, honesty to combat the betrayal, commitment to combat the abandonment, and worthiness to combat the unworthiness. So now that you have this event in your life which caused you some type of archetypal wound, maybe you've identified it, Now I want you to identify where in your life you have felt honor. If you have identified shame, can you identify in your life where you were being honored by people around you? If you chose betrayal as your archetypal wound, can you identify in your life where you've had a relationship that was built on honesty with somebody? Maybe somebody who was honest with you. If you've been abandoned, can you identify a time or a relationship which helped you realize that you were being committed to, or somebody that was committed to you? And then finally, if you felt that you were unworthy from a specific memory, what relationship or memory do you have that shows you that you're worthy? And this is very similar to the Dalai Lama meditation, which is where you identify the negative self within you, and you hold that negative self imagery within you as you meditate, and then you identify the positive self imagery that matches up with that. And the Dalai Lama says that just by doing this, just by identifying the negative self and comparing it to the positive self, the mind and the body and the spirit will automatically move to the positive self and envelop and absorb that which it prefers to be. So yes, you've had this negative self imagery, you've projected this negative self a time or two, but there's also a time where you are being your positive self. And we will innately, according to the Dalai Lama and according to Dr. Mario Martinez, move towards that which is positive, that which is healing, and that which is good. So in this way, the hero's journey and astrology can help us to see who we are, what we've been through, for what lessons, and where are we going, and who are we going to become. It can help us identify the archetypal wounds that may still be dormant within us, that may still need healing and attention. And when we give our attention, even on the smallest scale, to these archetypal wounds, we can start the process of transformation, the transformation of our own consciousness.